So here at Pod Cameras, we talk a lot about new cameras, new lenses, and new photographic equipment. All the latest stuff, we review it, I get hands-on time with it. It's a big part of my job that I really like. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a lot of fun, but it's not necessarily super representative of the real world. It's not like everyone is going out every year and upgrading their camera to the latest one or buying the latest and greatest kit. There's definitely a massive place for older cameras, for all kinds of photographers, for people just starting out, just learning photography, all the way up to professionals who make a living from photography or from video. There's lots and lots of great cameras that have come out over the last, 5-6 years that are still fantastic options right now. And that's something that maybe we don't talk about enough. We actually have a used department at Pod Cameras, and you can check the link in the description to go and check it out, where we have all kinds of different stuff. So a question that's been coming up a lot for me recently is, what camera should I get to kind of learn photography, right? It's that kind of time of year. People are either starting college or university and they need to buy a camera to actually learn photography, or they're just learning from YouTube. So what camera is going to work out really well? Well, this happens to have been coming up a lot for me recently with people asking me. So we've delved into the used department. We've picked out a few different kits, and over the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at 3 different kits that would make great kind of starter kits for someone learning photography, whether that might be you or whether that might be someone you know. This is the place to check all this stuff out. This week, we are taking a look at the Canon 60D with the EFS 18 to 55mm f4 to 5.6 lens. Now, this has been really interesting. I've been using this over the last few days, really kind of trying to see how this performs kind of as a camera in 2022. This came out quite a long time ago, and I'll be honest with you, it's pretty cheap now. In our used department, this varies in price a little bit depending on the condition you want to go for, but even if you wanted to go for an excellent condition model, you're looking at around about $259. And then the lens, again, differs quite a bit. I mean, you can get it as cheap as £69, this lens. But again, if you want an excellent one, you're looking around $159. So $259 for an excellent condition, one of these cameras, and $159 for the lens, excellent condition. And if you don't care, if you want it a little bit less excellent, still good and stuff like that, you can get these really quite remarkably cheap. And you might be thinking, okay, well, great, but the technology is not going to be, anywhere close to where it is now. And that is true. That's a fair thing to say. But it's still really quite good. So you've still got things like a flip out screen on the camera. You've still got things like decent autofocus. I mean, don't forget, Canon autofocus, it's not like it only just became good. It was really good before as well. And admittedly, it's not as lightning quick as it is now. It's a little bit slower. And admittedly, it's not, got the incredible eye tracking. But to be honest with you, I think if you're learning photography, it's almost better to learn on a camera like this, which doesn't have all of these incredible enhancements that just make your life a million times easier. I think if you use a camera like this, you have to learn how to do that stuff yourself. And when you inevitably one day upgrade to something like, let's say, an R6 or an R5, if you're keeping it within Canon, you're going to really appreciate those upgrades. And you can use them and it can really help you out, but you're not going to have to completely rely on them because you started out in a place where you had to learn a lot of the different ways of doing photography without relying on a camera that's going to take away a lot of that from you and do it for you. Let's take ISO performance, for example. I had a great time shooting with this camera. It was a little bit dark when I was shooting with it. The weather has not been ideal, but it was an interesting challenge to actually test out the ISO performance because, I used to own a Canon 80D and I never felt particularly comfortable shooting much above ISO 800. It would start to introduce too much noise. So I wanted to test that out with this camera. But something that it reminded me of is, with the ISO performance being so good with modern cameras, sometimes you can actually get a little bit carried away and start to just rely on being able to shoot quite happily at ISO 6400, ISO 10,000. The Canon EOS R, for example. When I first got hands-on with that, I was shooting ISO 10,000 and really not seeing any noise. And that's great, don't get me wrong, that's fantastic. But it does mean that you don't have to think nearly as much about the light. How am I going to light this? How am I going to get enough light into the camera, onto the sensor? How am I going to change where I am or change where the subject is or change my surroundings to get more light? And that's something that I think a camera like this, even though actually, if I'm totally honest with you, the ISO performance was better, quite a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I was shooting 1600 and I'll be honest, it's usable photos, which I didn't expect to be the case. But you know, when you're using a camera like this, you think a little bit more about that light. You think a little bit more about how you might light something, or how you might move to create a better light, or how you might expose things slightly differently to combat the problem you might experience with noise. Now, this lens is a great all-rounder. It does have image stabilization, which is great news, but you know, it's not as fast. It's f4 to 5.6, but I don't think that's a massive problem. It's a nice focal range as well as a kind of all-rounder focal range. It works out roughly, I'm not gonna do the maths, but it's roughly 24 to 70 as a full frame equivalent. And that's fine. I think that's a great kind of all-rounder setup for a lens like this. It's nice and small. The whole thing is nice and lightweight. You can easily have this in a bag with other stuff in there. So if you are going to college or you're going to university, this is fantastic. These Canon cameras, these DSLRs, they just feel really, really good as well. The buttons, everything's very ergonomic. The grip is super comfortable. It's a great option for learning photography on something like this, and you're going to be really happy with this for quite a long time. Now, the autofocus, for example, is a lot slower than all of the newer cameras, of course it is, but, you know, it's obviously very noticeable. But it didn't ever feel like it was causing me a massive problem. It never caused me to not be able to take a photo. You know, it just means you have to think a little bit about what you're doing, a little bit more about how the photo you're taking, maybe the composition, and how you're gonna focus. Now, it can also shoot full HD video, which is actually pretty nice for a camera like this. I think that that allows you to experiment with photo and video. Sure, it's not 4K, it's not 8K, it's not 6K. A lot of the newer cameras can do a lot of interesting things, but you can still get some decent video from this. And if you are shooting for YouTube or something like that, Full HD is still enough, right? A lot of us have moved on to 4K, but most people are watching in Full HD at most. And a lot of people are watching on their phones. So you'll find that Full HD is still absolutely fine. I also think that the fact that it has got this flip out screen, which can flip all the way around like that as well, is gonna work really well for someone learning on a camera like this, because it just allows a little bit more flexibility for where you might hold the camera. You've got a nice viewfinder, but you've also got a very nice flip out screen, which I think for newer photographers is always really, really nice, because it allows you to pop the camera down here and be able to look down at the screen, or pop the camera up here and look up at the screen. So I think that's a nice feature to have on a camera that you're learning on. Otherwise, like I say, you're gonna get very used to how this camera feels very quickly. And if you move on to other Canon cameras, you're gonna be right at home, because a lot of the stuff will still carry over. All in all, I really think this would be a fantastic option for anyone learning photography at any kind of age and in any kind of way. It just allows you to get some nice photos, some good photos, to learn a lot of the aspects of photography, including a lot of the aspects that are taken away by newer cameras. If you only learn on a camera that can do blisteringly fast, perfect autofocus without you having to do anything about it, you're not gonna learn that skill about focusing, about recomposing, about all that kind of stuff. And I think learning on a camera like this is a fantastic option for that. I think the 60D still has a place, absolutely, in today's world of photography. I think it's still a really useful camera to have out there. So you can check out a camera like this by following the links in the description. You can check out the lens as well. This is just the lens that we chose with the camera. It's a great all-rounder, but you could go for a prime lens instead or something like that. But this would be a fantastic all-rounder setup for kind of learning photography. So check out those links down there. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe as well, because we've got new content all the time. I will see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.